My wife told me I was embarrassing in front of her friends, so I left her there, canceled the vacation, and blocked everyone that laughed. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and this happened last summer. My wife and I had been planning a weekend getaway with her closest friends, a little vacation we were all supposed to enjoy, laugh, and unwind. On paper, it sounded perfect. I'd met some of her friends before, but honestly, I'd always felt a little judged. They had this way of making comments, little digs disguised as jokes, that made me second-guess myself. And my wife? She often laughed along, even when I felt small. That morning, we arrived at the resort, and everything seemed bright and cheerful. The sunlight spilled across the pool, birds were chirping, and the air smelled faintly of sunscreen and salt from the nearby beach. But even in that perfect postcard-like setting, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Her friends were already there, chatting, sipping coffee, and I noticed the quick glances as I carried my bag across the lobby. "Oh, don't trip on the rug," one friend joked, and everyone laughed, including my wife. I forced a laugh, but it landed wrong, like I was trying too hard. I brushed it off at first. Maybe I was overthinking it. After all, I wanted this weekend to be fun. I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. But there was this tiny, nagging voice in my head. They don't really respect me, do they? I tried to shake it. We settled into our rooms, unpacked, and I went to the balcony to catch some fresh air. The view was beautiful, the sun bouncing off the water, but I couldn't stop thinking about the morning. Something felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Her friends were polite enough, but their laughter had this sharp edge, like tiny knives I didn't want to notice. My wife joined me, smiling, holding 2 glasses of juice. "Relax, babe. It's just the first morning," she said, brushing my shoulder. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But deep down, I had this sinking feeling that this weekend wasn't going to be what I imagined. And maybe it was about to get much worse. The second morning started off like the first. Sun streaming. Through the curtains, the distant sound of waves and the faint hum of her friends chatting in the hallway. I tried to shrug off the previous day's awkwardness, thinking maybe I was imagining things. But it didn't take long for the first real jab to hit. As I poured my coffee, one of her friends leaned over and said, "Careful with that mug, don't. Want to spill it everywhere? Wouldn't want another messy moment, right?" They all laughed, and I felt my face heat up. My wife giggled too, glancing at me like she expected me to play along. I forced a chuckle, keeping my tone light. Yeah, wouldn't want that. But inside, I felt small. My chest tightened, like I couldn't breathe, and every instinct screamed at me that this wasn't just harmless teasing. It was subtle, slow, and cutting, like water dripping onto stone until it leaves a dent. I caught my reflection in the mirror for a brief second. Tight shoulders, uneasy smile, and I wondered if they really saw me for who I was or just a caricature for their entertainment. Later, we moved outside to the patio for breakfast. The air was salty, the sun warm on my back, but I couldn't shake the embarrassment. My wife told a story about something at work and, in passing, made a comment about me in front of her friends. "You know how he is, always so careful even with the tiniest thing." Everyone laughed lightly and I felt my stomach sink. It was a small thing, maybe, but the tone, the smirk, it stung. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. I could feel my face flushing, my hands fidgeting with the napkin. It was like I was under a microscope, every little move judged, and the worst part, my wife didn't notice my discomfort, or she didn't care. She sipped her juice and smiled, seemingly oblivious to how exposed I felt. By the time breakfast ended, I realized that this weekend might not be the relaxing escape I'd imagined. Something had shifted in the air, and I knew deep down that what started as teasing was only going to escalate. I just didn't know how far it would go. By mid-afternoon, things started to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. We were all sitting by the pool, the sun glaring off the water, laughter echoing against the walls, when my wife decided to tell one of her stories about me. "Remember how he tried to cook that pasta and nearly set the kitchen on fire?" she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. A few friends snickered. My stomach dropped and I felt my face flush hot as embarrassment settled deep in my chest. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words came out awkward and strained, like they were trapped behind a wall of shame. Her friends laughed harder, some nudging each other, and one whispered something that made me feel smaller, though I couldn't hear it clearly. My wife glanced at me grinning, seemingly unaware or uncaring of my humiliation. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the sun-baked tiles beneath my chair. The laughter rolled over me like waves, relentless, and I felt exposed in a way I hadn't felt in years. I could barely look anyone in the eye without my chest tightening. I tried to make a joke to lighten the mood, but it landed flat. My words sounded hollow, a pathetic echo of what I intended. Even the birds seemed louder than my voice, the chatter of the group cutting through me like a reminder that I was the outsider in my own marriage's social circle. I noticed my wife brushing it off as playful banter, but inside I felt cornered. Every glance from the group felt like a silent accusation. "See? He's ridiculous." At that moment, I realized that it wasn't just teasing anymore. It was public humiliation. Something that should have been a relaxing afternoon had become a stage where I was the punchline. I sank a little lower in my chair, gripping the edge to ground myself, my thoughts spinning. Is this really how she sees me? Or worse, how she wants everyone else to see me? The laughter continued, louder this time, and I knew one thing with certainty. This weekend wasn't going to be what I imagined, and whatever came next, it was going to hurt even more. Later that evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my wife aside, just the two of us near the balcony where the ocean breeze cut through the heat. My hands shook slightly as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Why do you keep embarrassing me in front of your friends?" I asked, trying to make it sound calm, rational. She looked at me, raised an eyebrow, and laughed softly. "Embarrassing you? Come on, it's all just jokes," she said, waving her hand like it was nothing. I felt my chest tighten. Jokes? They're laughing at me, not with me. I feel small, humiliated. The words were heavier than I expected, but she brushed them off. "You're overreacting," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Everyone thinks it's funny. Why can't you?" Her tone wasn't cruel exactly, it was dismissive. But to me, it felt like a betrayal. Even worse, I noticed her friends passing by on the terrace, glancing in our direction, smirks barely hidden. I swallowed hard and tried again. "I just want a weekend where I feel respected, not like a joke for your friend's entertainment." Her eyes flickered, a brief hesitation, but she quickly smiled. "Relax, babe. It's fine. You're taking it too seriously." She turned away, leaving me standing there with my stomach sinking. The wind was stronger now, salty and cold, as if even nature was echoing my unease. I walked back toward the group, trying to mask the tension, but every laugh from her friends felt sharper, more pointed. I could feel their eyes on me, judging every move, every awkward smile. I wanted to speak up again, to make them see the real me, but the words stayed lodged in my throat. By the time dinner was over, I realized something that terrified me. This wasn't just playful teasing. This was intentional, subtle, and cruel. And no matter how much I tried to confront it, she wouldn't, or couldn't, see it. That realization hit me like a wave, leaving me uncertain about what I should do next. Something told me that the weekend's worst humiliation hadn't even happened yet. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach that didn't go away. We were all supposed to go on a group hike, a scenic trail that should have been peaceful. Instead, the moment we stepped onto the path, it became obvious that the subtle humiliation from yesterday wasn't over. It was escalating. My wife started. commenting on everything I did, the way I laced my shoes, the way I carried the backpack, even the way I walked. Her friends laughed lightly, and one of them muttered under their breath, "Yeah, he's always so awkward." I forced a smile, tried to laugh along, but my chest felt tight, my hands cold. Every step I took seemed to echo, like I was walking under a spotlight, every movement scrutinized. Then came the midpoint twist. As we stopped for a water break, one friend leaned toward my wife and whispered something just loud enough for me to catch. "Honestly, we've always thought he was a joke." The words pierced through me. I froze. My wife's expression changed slightly. Her lips curved into a smirk that made my stomach drop. I couldn't believe it. All this time, it wasn't just teasing. It was a coordinated, subtle attack. They had been reinforcing each other, laughing, together at my expense, and my wife had been complicit the whole time. The sun beat down, warm and bright, but I felt like I was shrinking under its light. My thoughts spun. Have I really been the outsider in my own marriage's social world? I tried to speak, to defend myself, but the words stumbled out awkwardly. My wife laughed, brushing it off. "Come on, don't take it so seriously. It's just fun." Her friends giggled, and the whispers continued behind their hands. I felt a mix of shock, betrayal, and fury. Everything I thought I knew about this weekend, about my relationship, was collapsing in front of me. By the time we reached the summit, my patience had worn thin. I realized that this wasn't just a vacation. It was a test of my limits, and something inside me snapped. Whatever came next, I couldn't just pretend to be okay anymore. That evening, dinner felt like walking into a minefield. The restaurant was warm, the smell of grilled seafood in the air, but I barely noticed. I was hyper-aware of every glance, every giggle aimed at me. My wife, smiling across the table, casually dropped another bomb. "You know, he still can't figure out the wine list. Guess some things never change." Her friends laughed, some openly, some hiding it behind their hands, but all at my expense. My stomach churned. I felt the blood rush to my face, a hot, suffocating heat. I opened my mouth to respond, maybe even make a joke to save face, but the words faltered. I realized that the laughter wasn't just teasing anymore. It was cruel. She had made it clear, in this group, I was the punchline. Every past micro-jab, every joke I had brushed off suddenly made sense. It wasn't playful. It was intentional. I looked around at the table. Her friends' eyes gleamed with amusement, nudges and whispers flying back and forth. One friend even made a pointed comment about my career, something I hadn't shared with anyone before, and I could feel the sting of exposure. My wife laughed again like it was nothing, like I was overreacting. I wanted to explode, to scream, to throw the wine glass across the table, but I didn't. I sat there, pretending to sip my drink, heart hammering, hands trembling slightly. Then the thought hit me like a punch. I don't have to stay here. I don't have to take this. For the first time all weekend, clarity broke through the fog of humiliation. I could walk out. I could reclaim some dignity. My chest tightened, the world around me fading except for the voice inside saying, "Enough." By the end of the meal, I made a quiet decision. This wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was a boundary being crossed. And boundaries weren't suggestions. Something had to give. What I didn't know yet was how far I was about to take it. After dinner, I wandered out onto the deserted beach alone, the sand cold beneath my feet and the waves crashing loudly, echoing the turmoil inside me. I sank onto a driftwood log, staring at the horizon where the sun had just dipped below the water, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. I felt small, invisible, and utterly betrayed. The laughter, the whispers, the jokes, they all replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. My chest felt heavy, as if the weight of their judgment had settled inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge it. My wife didn't just embarrass me. She humiliated me, openly, repeatedly, and she didn't care. Worse, she encouraged it. I thought about all the vacations, dinners, gatherings where I had laughed along, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I was part of the group. I realized that I'd been complicit in my own humiliation, letting it slide for the sake of peace. Now, peace felt impossible. I closed my eyes, inhaling the salty air, trying to steady my racing heart. I thought about how powerless I had felt this entire weekend, how even my voice had been silenced, how my attempts at humor and defense had been dismissed. The ocean's roar seemed to mock me, relentless, like their laughter amplified by the night. Tears burned my eyes, not just for the embarrassment but for the betrayal, for the realization that the people I trusted had stacked the odds against me. I wondered, quietly, almost whispering to myself, is this really my life? Have I been nothing more than a punchline for them all along? The thought felt like an abyss opening beneath me. I wanted to scream, to run, to vanish, but I was rooted to that log, consumed by the mix of anger, heartbreak, and utter despair. And then, beneath that despair, a tiny spark of resolve flickered. I didn't know exactly what I would do next, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't let this continue. Something had to change, and soon. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt all weekend. I packed my bag quietly while everyone else slept, the room heavy with the scent of sunscreen and faint perfume. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline of finally taking control. I could hear her friends stirring in the other rooms, their laughter and chatter drifting through the hallways. My wife peeked out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, smiling. "Morning. Ready for breakfast?" she asked. I shook my head, feeling the weight of every insult and laugh from the past 2 days pressing against my spine. I said, calmly but firmly, "I'm leaving." She blinked, then laughed nervously. "Leaving? For breakfast?" I stepped closer, my voice low but unwavering. "No, I'm leaving. You can stay here with them, but I'm done." Her smile faltered, confusion flashing across her face. "Wait, what? You can't just—" I cut her off gently, almost sorrowfully. "I can. I'm done being the punchline. I'm done being humiliated." Downstairs, her friends were gathered in the lobby, sipping coffee, chatting. As I walked past them, their eyes widened, then flicked to smirks, whispers, and restrained laughter. I ignored it. Every step felt empowering, like I was shedding the weight of their judgment. I could hear her voice behind me, calling my name, but I didn't look back. The salty breeze from the open lobby doors hit my face, cold and liberating, and for the first time all weekend, I felt a flicker of freedom. I grabbed my keys, my phone, my dignity, and stepped outside. The sun glinted off the parking lot, the hum of cars filling the space, but it felt like silence compared to the chaos I left behind. I glanced back once, her jaw tight, her eyes wide, but I didn't hesitate. This wasn't just a physical departure. It was an emotional reclaiming of myself. And as I drove away, the hotel shrinking in the rearview mirror, a thought ran through my mind, cold and precise. This is only the beginning. Whatever came next, the humiliation and betrayal would meet its consequences. I pulled over at the first quiet spot and took a deep breath, letting the morning air fill my lungs. My hands were still trembling, not from fear, but from the intensity of what I was about to do. I opened my phone and started calling the travel agency, canceling every excursion we had booked. Flights, tours, spa reservations, everything. As I spoke, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief, because I was finally reclaiming control. Guilt, because I knew she would scream, argue, and try to guilt-trip me, but I didn't care anymore. As I finished the last call, I checked my phone. Her friends had already started messaging, trying to manipulate me, sending laughing emojis, questioning my sanity. One said, "You're ruining the weekend for everyone." Another, "He's such a drama king, lol." I stared at the screen, feeling the sting of their judgment, and yet I felt lighter. I blocked every single number, one by one. The world that had made me feel small, irrelevant, and humiliated was disappearing from my immediate reach. My wife's calls came next, but I ignored them. The voicemail she left was dripping with incredulity and panic. "You can't just do this. This is insane." I listened to it once, then deleted it. I realized in that moment that I had spent too long trying to earn respect from people who had no intention of giving it. And now, finally, I didn't have to. The air in the car felt different, cleaner, sharper, freer. I could almost hear my own heartbeat again without the constant background noise of ridicule. Every text deleted, every call blocked, every reservation canceled. It was like drawing a line in the sand. I was standing on the other side now. But even as the adrenaline faded, a small unease lingered. I hadn't confronted her yet. I hadn't faced the betrayal directly. And somewhere in the back of my mind I knew the storm was coming. It was only a matter of time before she realized that her little world, her perfect vacation, and the friends who laughed at me were all about to collide with the consequences of their cruelty. By midday, I felt an unusual clarity. Sitting alone in my hotel room, I opened my phone and started taking decisive action. Every friend of hers who had laughed at me whispered behind my back or egged her on. Blocked. Social media, messages, contact lists, gone. Each tap of the screen felt like peeling away a layer of the weekend's humiliation, like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried under judgment and ridicule. The relief was immediate, almost intoxicating. Her messages kept coming. "Why are you doing this?" one read. Another, "You're overreacting. Don't be dramatic." I stared at the notifications for a moment, feeling the weight of every word they'd said, every laugh I'd endured. Then I deleted them. I didn't respond, didn't explain. I didn't have to. Their approval was never mine to earn. My dignity, however, was. I thought about my wife. She had been part of it all, encouraging jokes, laughing at my expense, failing to notice or care about the humiliation. I could feel the familiar pang of anger, but it was tempered now with something stronger. Control. The room smelled faintly of sunscreen and travel brochures I had tossed aside, but the air felt lighter somehow, almost crisp. For the first time in days, I could breathe without the tension pressing against my chest. I realized that boundaries weren't just words, they were actions. I had drawn my line. I had protected myself from those who wanted to diminish me. The hotel, the group, the laughter, they were irrelevant now. I was no longer a participant in their cruel game. But even as the empowerment surged, a quiet thought crept in. The confrontation with my wife hadn't happened yet. The truth, unfiltered and undeniable, was waiting. And when it came, there would be no jokes, no laughs, no excuses. She was going to have to see, finally, what her choices had done and how I had risen above them. Something told me the reckoning was coming sooner than I expected. By late afternoon, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I called my wife to meet me outside, away from her friends, away from the judging eyes. She arrived, towel still draped over her shoulders, that same casual smile plastered on her face. "So, we're talking now?" she said, teasing, though her voice had a hint of nervousness I hadn't heard before. I didn't answer at first. I just looked at her steady, unflinching. "I know what's been happening," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. Her smile faltered slightly. You mean, the jokes?" she stammered. I shook my head. "Not jokes. You've been humiliating me. And your friends. They've been laughing, whispering, and egging you on. You weren't laughing with me. You were laughing at me." Her eyes widened, a flash of guilt, or maybe fear, passing through them. "That's not true," she said quickly, almost too quickly. It was playful. I didn't mean—" I cut her off gently but firmly. "Don't lie to me. I heard what your friend whispered yesterday. I saw the smirk you tried to hide. This wasn't innocent. This was intentional, and you knew exactly how it would make me feel." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. The air smelled faintly of salt and sunscreen from earlier, but it was heavy with tension. I could feel her heartbeat, faster now, and her hands twisting the towel in nervous fingers. Finally she spoke, her voice low and almost trembling. "Okay, fine. I admit it. I thought it was funny. I thought maybe it would make me feel better. I don't know. I didn't realize—" Her confession hung in the air, bitter and raw. I stared at her, letting the truth settle, feeling a mix of fury, relief, and vindication. She had underestimated me, and that would cost her. I took a step back, letting the weight of my own boundaries and newfound control sink in. The reckoning had arrived, and it wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. It was about respect, dignity, and the unshakable fact that I wouldn't let anyone, not her, not her friends, make me small again. But even as I processed it all, I knew the final step, the real closure, was yet to come. By evening, the weight of the weekend had shifted. I stood alone on the balcony, the salty breeze from the ocean filling my lungs, and for the first time in days I felt a clarity I hadn't known I could have. Her words, her laughter, the whispers of her friends, they no longer held power over me. I had drawn my line, enforced my boundaries, and reclaimed my dignity. The hotel below, the group, the petty cruelty, all of it felt distant, almost irrelevant. When my wife finally approached, hesitant and unsure, I didn't feel the familiar sting of embarrassment. Instead, I felt calm, resolute. "I've had enough," I said, voice steady. "This weekend, your jokes, the humiliation, your friends laughing at me, it ends here. I won't let it happen again." Her eyes widened, realizing that the man she had tried to belittle was no longer affected. I could see the flicker of fear, maybe even regret, crossing her face. I turned away, feeling the sun's last rays on my shoulders, letting the wind carry away the tension that had been trapped inside me for days. The vacation had been ruined, yes, but it had also revealed the truth about relationships, boundaries, and self-respect. I no longer needed approval from her friends, nor validation from anyone who didn't truly care about me. I was enough on my own. Later, as I packed the car to leave for home, I felt a quiet triumph. Each mile away from the resort, from the laughter and judgment, was a mile toward empowerment. I had faced humiliation, betrayal, and manipulation, and I had come out standing, whole and unbroken. I realized that the strongest revenge wasn't anger, wasn't yelling or shaming. It was walking away, reclaiming my peace, and refusing to let anyone diminish me again. And as I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time at the hotel, the image of her and her friends frozen in shocked disbelief, I whispered to myself, almost softly, "Some vacations are meant to teach you who truly belongs in your life." And I knew, with an unshakable certainty, that I belonged only with my own dignity, and nothing less.